Hello all, I'm Colette and I'm here today from Witch Ways to talk to you about folkloric magical spells and prayers, how to adapt them to use them today, and how they are constructed. I hope you enjoy. One of the things about folklore is that a lot of spells and prayers and folkloric practices tend to get passed down strictly within family lines or only through small regional lines or through covens, and so they tend to not be widely available and are often lost. However, in the early 1900s, some people decided to start collecting oral histories, folklore, folk tales, and start to publish them. In many of them, you can see the influences of Christianity. In fact, a lot of them are really heavily Christianized, but some of them are rooted in a very paganistic, pre-Christian way, even in the 1900s. The first one is from England, and it's from the book A Modern Herbal by Maude Grieves. And this is a simple harvesting prayer for gathering the wood of elder. And the wood of elder, or the twigs of it, was never gathered without very clear consent from the tree and the dryad spirit that lived there. So the spell goes, Lady Elhorn, give me some of thy wood, and I will give thee some of mine when it grows in the forest. And so this petition to the tree spirit was done with bended knee, a bare head, and folded arms, and was used until fairly recently. And so I interpret the words of this petition to mean that when the person who is harvesting this wood dies, their body will go back to the land and will be used to nourish the forest and the trees within it. It's always good to ask plants specifically for consent, but elder was one that people were very careful about asking in particular ways because it was so powerful. Over time, Christianity really demonized the tree and the spirit that lived in it. People still greatly respected the elder tree, even though Christianity turned the spirit of the tree into an evil witch. I have really clear protocols and ways that I have adapted this prayer for harvesting elder. What I do is I use a pendulum so that I get a very clear yes or no answer from the tree. I also offer it fingernails and hair. I've given it ashes from my ancestors, and if when I die there are witches around, I want some of my ashes given to the elder tree because it's one of my favorites. My ancestors viewed the ancient world in a very animistic way. To them, everything was alive, and it made sense to them to try and interact and petition things in order to bring benefits to themselves or to ward off harm. The next one comes from the Isle of Man off the coast of Scotland from the Book of Fairy Faith of Celtic Countries. And this information was also collected in the early 1900s. And this particular petition was in originally Gaelic and needed to be translated. So the spell goes, Little Manannán of Lear, who blessed our island, bless us and our boat, well going out and better coming in, with the living and dead in the boat. I like to look at the format of old prayers, spells, petitions, charms to understand how they were structured and what the essential ingredients are. And that helps me create my own spells, or at least understand what it is I'm asking if I'm using one of these older spells. In this petition, the first part is about properly identifying, venerating, honoring, and acknowledging the being that you're calling on, which in this case is Manannán mac Lir. They name his father and acknowledge that he has already blessed their island. Manannán, son of Lear, is a powerful Celtic sea god. And so I think that naming the being that you're calling on for help at the very start of any type of magical working is really, really helpful. So the second part of this petition or prayer is about what it is that they need. And they're talking about the main thing that they need, which in this case is blessing the boat and making sure that everyone that goes out on the boat goes out well and comes back alive. So they're being really clear about what they need and that they need to be safe, not just at a specific part of the journey, not just when they're departing, not just when they're coming back, but during the whole process. The dead in this petition refer to the dead fish that they hope to bring home, and the living refer to the people on the boat. And the last part is about, and here's a benefit we would like to also get. In other words, some fish would be great because that's the purpose of our journey. The greater part of the prayer really though is about making sure that everyone goes out and returns safely. It's actually very clearly and carefully worded. This is a really adaptable prayer or petition and a great template to use for your own spells and invocations. So if I was going to use this one and adapt it for something, say like a home protection spell, I would start by naming a spirit I've worked with who is associated with home and hearth. In Celtic tradition, that might look like calling on Bridget, and I might say something like, Bridget, mighty queen of the heavens, daughter of the good God, you who know the secrets of fire, healing, hearth, and home, you who have blessed me. So that would be the first part. That would be the identification and honoring part. And then the second part would be what it is I need. So I might say something like, I ask you to keep my home safe, that me and mine be safe from all dangers, loss, and illness this night and all nights. So mote it be. And that's where I added a little ending phrase in there to activate it. And so this spell, and the woman who gave it to the author of the book, was in her 90s in the early 1900s. And what she said about the spell was that her grandfather called on Manannán MacLír, but her father changed it to St. Patrick to make it more Christian. So what we're looking at here is a spell that was preserved as pagan until the early to mid 1800s in one family. The next spell comes from a book called The Magic Songs of the Finns, and these were also collected in the early 1900s. And this is a spell for success in hunting, and it's a little bit different because it's meant to be sung and it is meant to be accompanied by an offering. So this is how the spell goes. O moon's daughter, bake a suet cake, a honey bannock, sun's daughter, with which I will make the forest kind, with which I will make the backwoods well disposed upon my hunting days during the time I seek for game. Then after the hunter has made the offering, he might say something like, approve, O forest, of my salt, my dish of oats, O forest god. Another thing about this particular set of spells in the Song of the Finns is that none of them were complete. The author pieced them together from similar types of spells for specific purposes. Partially, the reason they were incomplete is that there was a belief that to tell or give away a spell in its complete form would decrease its efficacy. Another prayer or spell from that book is based on the idea that you can banish a minor or small danger by invoking the power of a big, more badass kind of spirit that will threaten the minor danger into withdrawing. And as I said, some of these are very gruesome. They end with phrases like, if thou should raise thy head from there, the thunder god will split thy head in two with a silver knife and with a golden club. Another thing that I find very interesting in this book is the vast majority of it is taken up with the origin of things. And that is because the magical people of that time felt that it was important to know the origin of diseases or harmful things in order to properly banish them by naming their true names, their history, and their originating point. That knowledge gives you power. Many witches today have secret or magical or initiatory names that they don't share with the general public because of the belief that when someone knows your true name, they have power over you. These names were often considered to be the names that the spirit world knows you by, as opposed to, say, a magical name that you have chosen for yourself. I feel that in order to have a name that the spirit world knows you by requires a lot of introspection, deep reflection. It's a long process. The next one is from the Carmina Gadelica book, which is a collection of prayers and blessings that are heavily Christianized from the Gaelic-speaking regions of Scotland in the late 1800s. They are really wonderful, and it's a really nice, thick book. The only thing that I don't love about them is they're all very similar sounding because the author rewrote them all in his own literary style to make them more beautiful instead of rustic like they were. And this love charm that I'm going to share gives a very short token acknowledgement to the Lord, and really kind of appears to not be a Christian prayer or spell at all in my viewpoint. This love spell starts with the idea that just as water is drawn through a straw, this spell will draw your love to you and keep them with you. It then directs the petitioner to get up on a Sunday, which is a sacred day in folklore in Christian countries, and go to the seashore and find a flat rock to work on, and to take some butterbur, some foxglove, 9 fresh stalks of fern, some coals, a wooden shovel, and some seaweed, and 3 bones from an old man newly torn from the grave, and you burn everything into ashes. Sprinkle them on the breast of your lover against the sting of the north wind, which in my mind, what that means is like, that's what you're telling your lover you're smearing the ashes on them for, because otherwise, why would they let you do that? The instructions for the spell to complete it were to walk 5 times about the rath of procreation, which a rath is an old hill fort from the Iron Age and must have been a local sacred site. I think this is a difficult spell to replicate for a few reasons, but there are some things we can learn about carrying out magic from the spell. The first, that is in folk magic, spells were often done on sacred days. In the past, that might have been new moon or full moon or one of the local sacred days in the wheel of the year. But in Christian times, that defaulted to Sunday, the Lord's Day, to call on the power of the God. The second thing is location, which is at the shore of the ocean. The boundaries between land and sea are what is known as liminal space. It's the borders between worlds, and it represents not just the difference between 2 ecosystems, but it actually stands in as the border between this world and the spirit world. When you do magic in liminal places or at liminal times like dusk and dawn, that gives your spell more power and gives you more access to the other world and to the spirit world. The thing that I think is least important in this particular spell is the ingredients, particularly the herbs. And I think they're not as important because every region would have had different herbs that they use. That's what folk magic did. They used the practices and herbs and plants that were available in their region and were meaningful to them and that they had relationships with. Let me know in the comments if you want more folk magic and lore. And it is the new year, so I'm looking at my goals and I want to really substantially raise the number of Patreon subscribers that I have. I love doing YouTube so much, but really my wonderful Patreon subscribers are what makes it possible for me to do this work. There's just me doing this editing and camera work and all the different things, and it takes a lot of time. So if you are interested, check out my Patreon page. You don't have to, but I would love it if you did. The tiers start at $5 a month, and it's great content. If you want, hit like and subscribe, and until next time, stay safe and be well.